After days of wandering in the endless forest, Josh and Heather have lost Mike, whose horrifying screams echo through the darkness but never reveal his location. Trapped, sleep-deprived, and emotionally broken, they cling to each other inside their tent, unsure whether the sounds outside belong to their missing friend or whatever is hunting them. The air in the Black Hills forest didn't just feel cold, it felt heavy, pressurized by a malice that seemed to leach the oxygen out of every breath. For days, the woods had been a cage of repeating scenery, the same rotting pines, the same suffocating gray sky, the same frantic, looping path that always led them back to the same terrifying silence.
"We'll keep walking,"
Josh had rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering over stone. He'd pulled a crushed pack of cigarettes from the bottom of his bag, a relic from a world that felt years away.
"We're still alive, we're still smoking."
They were being hunted. The sounds in the night, the high-pitched, mocking laughter of children, the snapping of heavy branches that sounded like bone, the rhythmic, guttural chanting were closing in. And Mike, the most grounded of them, the one who had kept their morale from completely collapsing, had been gone for 2 days. As night bled into the forest, the transition was abrupt, like a shutter slamming shut. They were huddling near their tent, the darkness so absolute it felt physical, when the silence was pierced. Somebody, the voice was thin, reedy, and unmistakably Mike's. It didn't sound like a man, it sounded like an echo of a man, stripped of everything but agony. Josh froze, his eyes widening.
"Oh, Jesus Christ! That can't be him!"
Heather breathed, though her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs.
"Josh, don't!"
But Josh was already moving. He was driven by a desperate, suicidal need for resolution. They stumbled through the brush, twigs whipping their faces like lashes. Every sound of their movement seemed too loud, a neon sign pointing them out to the thing that had been watching them for days. Then, the trees broke. Looming out of the darkness like a rot-infested ribcage was the house. It was ancient, its foundation buckled by the encroachment of the earth. The walls were peeling away, revealing the lath and plaster underneath like exposed sinew. It was a place where light went to die.
"Mike?"
Josh called out, his voice a cracked tremor. They crossed the threshold. The floorboards groaned with a sound like a wet crunch. Josh didn't hesitate. He pushed deeper into the gloom, his flashlight cutting a frantic, jittery path through the dust motes.
"Josh, wait! Don't leave me!"
Heather screamed, but the house seemed to swallow his shadow. Then, from the dark maw of the hallway, a voice answered. It wasn't the distant, echoing cry from before. It was right there, just around the corner. "Help, me." It was Mike, but it was wrong. The cadence was broken, stuttering, as if he were speaking through water. Josh rounded the corner, his breathing heavy.
"Mike?"
"Is that you?" Heather stumbled behind him, the 16mm camera trembling in her hands. She rounded the corner and stopped dead. Mike was there. He was sitting on the floor in the center of a small, cramped room that smelled of deep, wet earth. He was facing away from them, slumped against the wall. His clothes were shredded, dark stains blooming across his back.
"Oh my God, Mike, are you okay? We've been looking for you."
His hand hovering over Mike's shoulder. Mike didn't move. He didn't turn around. He began to hum, a low, discordant vibration that seemed to make the very walls of the house shudder. Suddenly, Mike's head snapped at an impossible angle. It wasn't a natural motion. It was as if his neck had been unhinged. He looked at Josh, but his eyes were voids, black, sunken pits that reflected no light.
"You came,"
Mike whispered. The sound wasn't coming from his throat. It felt like it was coming from the floorboards beneath them.
"Where is Josh?"
Heather shrieked, looking around, a sudden, cold realization washing over her. She realized with a jolt of horror that as she watched, Josh, the real Josh, had stepped into the room, but he was now standing in a space that seemed to fold in on itself. She looked at the man sitting on the floor, and for a split second, The veil flickered. It wasn't just Mike. The room was shifting. The walls were covered in those same symbols, the stick figures, the strange, jagged geometry that defied logic. And Josh, who had been standing next to her, was suddenly nowhere to be seen.
Josh?
Heather turned back to the hallway, but it was empty. The space where he had been standing a second ago was now a solid wall of rotting wood. She spun back to the room. Mike was standing now. He was tall, unnaturally tall, his limbs elongated, his skin stretched thin over bone that seemed to be rearranging itself in real time. "Where is he?" Heather screamed, clutching the camera.
Where is he? Mike, what happened to you? Where is Josh?
He's not here, Heather. He's downstairs.
Mike began to laugh, a sound like glass breaking in a velvet bag. He stepped forward, his movements erratic, jerky, like a marionette operated by a sadistic hand. Heather backed away, her heels catching on a floorboard. She felt the house begin to lean, to groan, as if the structure itself were sentient and hungry. She fumbled for the light on her camera, but the beam flickered and died. In the absolute darkness, the only thing she could hear was the wet, rhythmic slapping of footsteps coming from the basement, but they weren't Josh's. They were too heavy, too deliberate.
Josh!
She wailed, her voice cracking.
Answer me!
From the bowels of the house, a voice rose up. It was Josh's voice, but it was being played back to her, distorted, as if someone were imitating him through a warped recording. "I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm right here." The floor beneath her felt like it was dissolving into soft, yielding mud. She turned and ran, the camera bumping against her chest, the lens capturing nothing but the blur of shadows and the terrifying, ancient geometry of the hallway. She reached the top of the cellar stairs. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow with a faint, sickly bioluminescence. She looked down into the pit of the basement. There was Josh. He was standing in the far corner, facing the wall. He was completely still. "Josh," she sobbed, scrambling down the crumbling stone steps. The air grew colder, freezing the sweat on her skin.
Josh! Josh! We have to go! Now! Josh! Please!
Slowly, Josh turned his head. His eyes were wide, vacant, and fixed on something on the wall that Heather couldn't see. His mouth opened, and a thick, black fluid began to pour from his lips. Behind him, emerging from the shadows of the corner, was a silhouette. It was massive, towering, with limbs that reached out like branches of a dead tree. It wasn't a person. It was the forest itself, coalesced into a form that defied human anatomy. It had no face, only a swirling vortex of darkness where the features should have been. It placed a hand, a long, multi-jointed appendage that looked like a branch tipped with ivory claws on Josh's shoulder. Josh didn't scream. He simply dissolved. He didn't die. He simply ceased to be solid, his body unraveling into fine, black dust that swirled up into the rafters. Heather fell to her knees, the 16mm camera dropping from her limp fingers. The lens hit the gravel of the cellar floor, the motor whirring one last time as it tilted upward. The entity turned its featureless void toward her. There was no sound now, no more cries for help, no more footsteps, just the overwhelming weight of the darkness closing in. Heather looked into the lens of her camera, the final witness to a world that didn't want them, and as the blackness reached out to claim her, she realized the truth. They hadn't been lost in the woods, they had been gathered, and the house was not an exit, but a harvest. The film shuddered, the frame rate slowing to a crawl. The basement went silent. The camera lay on the gravel, a single flickering red light on the display, the only thing left of their existence. In the corner, the shadow lingered, waiting for the next group to wander too far off the path. The woods remained, as they always had, quiet, hungry, and watching. How does this version of the nightmare change your perspective on Heather's role in the ending?